There is a conversation hidden in a heavily suppressed ancient manuscript discovered in the Egyptian desert that completely reframes the modern epidemic of human exhaustion. According to this obscure text, the constant fatigue, the sudden inexplicable drops in mood, the heavy brain fog, and the feeling of being intensely drained when surrounded by crowds might not be a psychological failure or a biological flaw. Instead, it describes this exhaustion as a bioenergetic physical reality, an active harvesting of human vital force. Furthermore, the ancients who recorded this conversation believed that one specific elemental metal, when worn on a highly specific side of the human anatomical structure, was the ultimate key to scrambling the unseen frequencies that constantly parasitize human energy. Here is exactly what I mean by this ancient energetic framework. And to truly understand its profound implications, we must look closely at the Nag Hammadi Library. Discovered in 1945 by a local farmer digging for fertilizer in Upper Egypt, these ancient Gnostic writings, which include controversial texts like the Gospel of Judas and the Apocryphon of John, were kept deliberately hidden from public translation and mainstream theological study for decades. When these texts were finally analyzed by independent scholars, they introduced a concept of spiritual warfare, an existential reality that sounds much closer to modern quantum physics and frequency mechanics than to any traditional religious dogma you have ever been taught. The texts describe a hierarchy of entities known as the Archons. However, unlike the medieval depictions of demons or fallen angels with physical wings and pitchforks, the Gnostic texts describe these forces in a highly clinical manner,
essentially detailing them as non-physical frequency parasites. They are depicted as inorganic, deeply unconscious entities that exist just outside the narrow bandwidth of normal human visual perception. According to this complex worldview, the material universe we inhabit was not created by the ultimate, benevolent source of all light, but rather fashioned by a lesser creator known as the Demiurge. The Demiurge built the physical world as a containment zone, a closed-loop structural system of limitation and density. In this vast containment system, the Archons act as the invisible wardens. But there is a massive limitation to their existence that dictates their entire behavior. They cannot generate their own energy. Because they are completely cut off from the eternal source, they are entirely dependent on external sources to sustain their existence. They can only harvest ambient energy, and their absolute primary food source, according to these ancient manuscripts, is the human biofield, specifically the dense electromagnetic emissions generated by low-frequency human emotional states. To grasp the mechanics of this, we must briefly bridge the gap between ancient mysticism and modern biology. Fear, deep embedded shame, endless looping anxiety, visceral rage, and profound despair are not just abstract psychological states. They are highly measurable physical broadcasts.
Every single thought you have generates a distinct electrical impulse within the neural networks of your brain. Every emotion you feel broadcasts a corresponding magnetic wave outward from your physiological center. Groundbreaking research from organizations like the HeartMath Institute has scientifically confirmed that the human heart is a powerful electromagnetic generator. It emits a toroidal field that extends several feet outside the physical boundary of the body,
And this field drastically alters its geometric shape and vibrational frequency based entirely on our internal emotional state. When a person is experiencing high-frequency states like profound gratitude or deep inner peace, their biofield becomes coherent, highly structured, and vibrates at a rapid rate that denser frequencies simply cannot interact with.
However, when a person is trapped in chronic, unrelenting stress or pervasive fear, that field becomes incredibly erratic, chaotic,
and begins broadcasting at much lower, denser frequencies. The Gnostic texts suggest, with a terrifying level of clarity, that this dense, chaotic bandwidth is exactly the frequency the Archons are engineered to scan for, attach to, and continuously feed upon. They farm human misery because human misery produces the specific electromagnetic resonance they require to survive. Why does this happen? And more importantly, how do the ancients claim we could structurally stop it?
This is where the actual mechanism of elemental disruption comes into play, revealing a mind-bending intersection between ancient esoteric defense tactics and the actual measurable laws of physics. The texts heavily imply that certain natural, earthbound elements can disrupt the connection between these parasitic frequencies and the human biofield. However, it is fundamentally crucial to understand that it is not all metals. The ancients were highly specific.
The mechanism relies on one very specific elemental material,
Pure, unalloyed copper. The mechanics of how this elemental defense system works operate in three distinct, highly logical steps that mirror modern electronic warfare and signal jamming technologies. First, we must deeply understand the fundamental nature of the metal itself. Copper is globally renowned for being a highly efficient conductor of electricity, which is why it wires our modern world. But crucially,
in the realm of physics,
copper is also highly diamagnetic. A diamagnetic material is one that creates a subtle, repelling force, essentially inducing a weak magnetic field in the exact opposite direction whenever it is exposed to an external applied magnetic field. It does not act like a heavy iron shield that stubbornly attempts to block a physical blow. Rather, it distorts, bends, and refracts electromagnetic waves that come into contact with it.
When pure elemental copper is placed in direct, constant contact with human skin, it subtly but profoundly alters the structural integrity and the geometric resonance of the electromagnetic bubble surrounding the physical body. Second, this subtle diamagnetic distortion creates a highly effective, continuous form of energetic camouflage. To truly visualize this, try to imagine an external entity or a predatory frequency scanning the energetic environment the way radar sweeps in airspace looking for a solid target. They are searching for a consistent, readable, rhythmic pattern of human fear or anxiety. When elemental copper is intimately introduced into the biofield, the resulting diamagnetic interference causes that field to suddenly appear completely garbled and unreadable to the external observer. It is the exact energetic equivalent of placing a layer of thick, static interference film over a clear glass window. The light inside the house still functions perfectly. The inhabitants are still alive and moving, but from the outside looking in, the predatory viewer cannot decipher what is happening. The signal simply becomes a wall of white noise. The ancient teachings propose that Archons, being inorganic and lacking creative intuition, rely entirely on mechanical pattern recognition to identify and attach to a human host.
When the copper distorts the local field, the human's electromagnetic signature no longer matches the target profile the parasite is programmed to seek. The human effectively becomes invisible, slipping entirely off the energetic radar. Third, the placement of this metal is not random or based on arbitrary superstition. It is highly specific and rooted in ancient anatomical mastery.
The esoteric instructions emphatically pinpointed the left side of the human body,
particularly focusing on the left wrist. If we examine nearly every deeply rooted traditional system of energy medicine and spiritual anatomy throughout recorded human history, The human body is universally understood to be deeply asymmetrical in how it processes universal energy. The right side of the physical body is universally viewed as projective, output-oriented, solar,
and masculine in its energetic polarity. It is the side of the body that pushes energy into the material world, the side of action and external manifestation. The left side, conversely, is receptive, input-oriented, lunar, and feminine. It is intricately connected to the right hemisphere of the brain, governing intuition and subconscious processing. Physiologically, the left side of the body is where the parasympathetic nervous system deeply integrates with our environment. Therefore, collective psychic debris and subtle unseen frequencies primarily enter the human biosystem through the receptive channels on the left. By strategically placing the diamagnetic interference field of pure copper directly over the left wrist, which serves as a major arterial pulse point and a massive energetic gateway, the mechanism of defense is established exactly at the point of greatest vulnerability. You are not blocking your own internal energy flow,
nor are you in any way hindering your vital ability to project your intentions into the world. You are simply placing a highly sophisticated elemental static generator right at the front door of your consciousness, scrambling any low-frequency entity that attempts to enter your system uninvited. So, what is the actual tangible effect of implementing this ancient mechanism? According to those who study and apply these esoteric principles,
the results are profound and operate on multiple cascading levels of human experience.
We can break these effects down into the disruption of 3 specific types of parasitic energetic interference. The first major effect is the immediate disruption of what esoteric researchers call ambient frequency skimming. This is the pervasive, low-level, constant energy harvesting that the vast majority of modern humanity simply accepts as baseline normal fatigue. It is the deeply frustrating experience of waking up exhausted and lethargic, even after a supposedly full 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. It is the phenomenon of feeling completely drained after simply walking through a crowded shopping mall or sitting in a busy corporate office.
It is the heavy, suffocating brain fog that descends upon your mind out of nowhere
when you are simply existing in an urban environment. This is not necessarily a biological failure. It is frequency skimming. Archonic forces constantly graze on the ambient energy of the masses. By wearing the copper on the receptive input channel of the left wrist, the pattern of your biofield becomes fundamentally unreadable to these ambient forces.
The external frequencies that are constantly attempting to skim your surface energy can no longer lock onto your electromagnetic signal.
This results in a sudden, highly noticeable return of baseline physical and mental vitality for the individual. The invisible leak in your biological battery is finally plugged. You simply stop bleeding your vital life force into the surrounding environment. The second, and perhaps much more vital effect, is the active prevention of deeper energetic attachment.
While frequency skimming is casual and opportunistic,
attachment is severe and targeted. Energetic attachment occurs when an external low-frequency influence successfully locks onto a chronic, unhealed emotional wound within the human host. This could be a childhood trauma that was never fully processed, or a deep sense of unworthiness that loops endlessly in the subconscious mind. When these low-frequency emotions are broadcast constantly, they act as an anchor point.
The Gnostic theory suggests that while a piece of copper cannot magically exercise an energetic attachment that is already deeply rooted and fully integrated into a person's psyche over many years, it completely prevents new parasitic cords from being formed. The diamagnetic interference pattern created by the copper is simply too erratic and unstable for a newly approaching parasite to establish a firm, lasting grip on the biofield.
It affords the individual a crucial layer of energetic isolation. It buys you the quiet, unbothered psychological space necessary to finally observe your own thoughts without the relentless whispering interference of external negativity amplifying your fears. The third, and arguably the most dangerous level of interference disrupted by this mechanism, is frequency broadcasting.
This is a tragic phenomenon where an individual's biofield becomes so deeply compromised by archonic frequencies that they cease to be just a victim and actively become a passive transmitter for those low frequencies. They unknowingly drain the energy of everyone around them, acting as a relay station for the demiurgic grid. We have all encountered these individuals in our lives. They are the people who seem to literally suck the oxygen and the joy out of a room the precise moment they walk through the door. The introduction of elemental copper on the receptive channel physically disrupts the complex feedback loop required for this broadcasting to occur. It breaks the energetic circuit. When the parasitic frequency attempts to push its dense, chaotic signal through the host's field to infect others, the diamagnetic property of the copper scrambles the output. The signal bounces back garbled and impotent. The individual's biofield can no longer be effectively utilized as a weaponized transmitter against the collective. To deeply ground this theoretical framework in historical reality, one of the most brilliant examples of this application can be found in the daily practices of the Essenes. The Essenes were a deeply mystical and highly disciplined Jewish sect operating in the harsh deserts of the Middle East around the time of Jesus. Many historical scholars and quantum researchers believe the Essenes possessed incredibly advanced knowledge of human energy dynamics and the mechanical laws of the unseen spiritual world. Historical records, coupled with profound archaeological findings in the caves of the Qumran region, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were hidden, strongly suggest that Essene initiates frequently wore simple, unadorned bands of pure copper. For the Essenes, this practice was absolutely not a matter of superficial fashion or a meaningless religious decoration. It was considered a necessary, highly tactical, energetic defense protocol. They lived in an era and a brutal political climate that they fully believed was heavily monitored and ruthlessly influenced by the archonic forces of the Demiurge. The violent Roman occupation and the pervasive, inescapable suffering of the general populace generated a massive, suffocating cloud of low-frequency emotional energy that hung over the region like a psychic smog. The Essenes understood that to maintain the incredibly high-frequency states of consciousness required for their deep, prolonged meditations, and to preserve their pure connection to the divine source, they had to utilize the physical properties of the material world to defend themselves. They consciously used elemental copper to carve out a safe, electromagnetically quiet space within the demiurgic construct, so the spiritual world could operate freely within their minds. They profoundly understood a truth that modern humanity has largely forgotten. You cannot effectively meditate, pray with true power, or reach elevated states of cosmic awareness if your vital life force is constantly being siphoned away by unseen environmental forces. The copper acted as the essential netting that kept the energetic parasites at bay while they did the heavy, transformative spiritual lifting of human evolution. This deep structural understanding of energy mechanics also shines a glaring light on exactly why these specific teachings, and the Gnostic texts as a whole, were so violently suppressed by early institutional powers. The spiritual and political authorities of the time, who sought absolute, unquestioned dominion over the human soul and the overarching societal structure, had a vested, powerful interest in keeping the general populace weak, fearful, and perpetually reliant on external institutional intercession for their salvation. If the common people discovered that they carried within their own grasp the simple, physical, and highly effective tools to make themselves completely invisible to parasitic forces, the entire infrastructure of spiritual control and energetic farming would crumble overnight. If humanity realized they could reclaim their sovereign energy simply by understanding the relationship between human biology and Earth's elements, the middlemen of the divine would be rendered entirely obsolete. The instruction to utilize elements like copper was a direct, elegant circumvention of the entire archonic monitoring system. It was a master key that unlocked the prison cell from the inside out. This is precisely why the texts were hunted down and burned, and why the physical applications of energetic defense were aggressively relegated to the mocked and dismissed realms of primitive folklore. Now, as we unpack this profound historical and energetic framework, it is absolutely crucial from a standpoint of genuine spiritual maturity to establish a firm and grounded boundary regarding this information. What we are deeply exploring here represents a historical synthesis of ancient Gnostic philosophy, esoteric spiritual tradition, and highly compelling alternative energetic theories. It provides a wildly fascinating and logically sound lens through which to view human consciousness, environmental sensitivity, and the massive, undeniable epidemic of modern chronic fatigue. However, pure copper is not a magic wand. It is not an instant cure-all that absolves any human being of the responsibility of doing profound, often difficult personal psychological work. Wearing a metal band on your left wrist does not biologically cure clinical depression. It does not replace necessary medical or professional psychological care. And most importantly, it absolutely does not make a person immune to the natural karmic consequences of their own toxic behavioral choices, their unhealed projections, or their negative thought patterns. The ancients meticulously taught that the physical shield simply buys you time and space. It lessens the relentless, heavy external pressure of the collective unconscious so that you actually have the surplus internal energy required to heal your own internal trauma. It gives you the necessary breathing room to observe and manage your emotional outputs, to bravely confront your own psychological shadow, and to actively, consciously choose elevated states of being, like profound gratitude and unconditional love, over the easy defaults of fear and despair. The copper is merely the armor, but you are still the warrior on the battlefield. The ultimate impenetrable shield is, and always has been, a sovereign, deeply self-aware, and emotionally disciplined mind that refuses to participate in the frequency of fear. The relentless, methodical suppression of these ancient texts for nearly 2 millennia tells us one undeniable, glaring truth. The intersection of human bioenergy, emotional frequency, and material physics has always been one of human history's most fiercely guarded secrets. The powers that construct the systems of the world have always known that a fully energized, emotionally clear, and energetically sovereign human being is entirely impossible to control, manipulate, or farm. If this deep exploration of ancient Gnostic defense mechanisms and the hidden physics of the human biofield resonated with your logical mind or your intuition today, or if you have ever personally experienced that heavy, unexplained energetic drain in your own life and fundamentally wondered if there was a deeper mechanical reason for it, I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know your perspective on biofields, energetic protection, and the hidden history of human frequency. Do you believe our energy is being actively harvested by the systems around us? Make sure to subscribe to the channel as we continue to relentlessly investigate the hidden mechanisms of history, esoteric energy, and the boundless, untapped potential of the human mind. See you in the next video.